Hey everyone, ever feel like dating these days is just a lot? Seriously. Apps, notifications, swipe right culture, and constant updates. It's like you need a PhD to understand the modern dating scene. But have you ever stopped and wondered how people even dated before all this digital chaos? Before smartphones? Before the internet was even a thing? Today, we'll be hopping into a time machine and taking a trip down memory lane to explore the evolution of dating, from the 90s all the way to today. Ready to see how dating used to work? Buckle up because this is going to be fun. First stop, the 1990s. Pages, payphones, and real conversations. The 1990s. What a time to be alive. It was an era defined by analog technology, an early internet, and the dawn of the digital age. When it came to dating in the 90s, things were a lot slower paced and less instantaneous than today. But there was something deeply meaningful about it. The 90s were the last decade where the art of conversation and face-to-face connection held supreme. If you wanted to meet someone or get to know someone, you actually had to put in the effort to show up, make a good impression, and communicate in person. Can you imagine? It was an era before texting, swiping, or even social media, but dating was still very much alive and kicking. Let us take a closer look at what made the 1990s such a unique and special time for romance and relationships. Meeting people. Face-to-face connections. In the 1990s, the main way to meet people wasn't through a dating app or a direct message on Instagram. Instead, people met through mutual friends, at work, in school, or through shared interests like joining clubs or attending social events. The idea of meeting someone in real life was a lot more common, and it required a bit of courage and initiative. If you wanted to find a date, you had to actively put yourself in places where you could interact with people. Places like coffee shops, bookstores, or the local bar. While some people did make the bold move of meeting someone at a party or social gathering, more often than not, friendships turned into romances naturally. You'd meet someone, talk for a while, and over time, the connection would deepen. In many ways, it was about quality over quantity. You didn't have hundreds of potential matches at your fingertips. You had to work with the people around you and hope that a meaningful connection would form through actual conversation and shared experiences. Communication. Pages, payphones, and real talk now. Let's talk about how people actually communicated in the 90s. We didn't have the instant access that smartphones give us today. Instead, we had to work with what we had, which included pagers, landline phones, and good old-fashioned face-to-face conversation. If you wanted to call someone, you'd dial their number on a landline, and if they weren't home, you'd either leave a message on their answering machine or hope they picked up the phone. It was a lot more personal, and much more of a gamble, compared to today's world of texts, emails, and DMs. For those of us who remember the days before cell phones, pagers, also known as beepers, were a major part of the dating landscape. Imagine this. You're hanging out with friends or on a date, and suddenly your pager goes off. You'd quickly find a payphone, dial the number, and hope the person who sent you the page would be there. You'd have to deal with the uncertainty of whether or not they'd call you back. It wasn't as seamless as sending a text or calling, and it certainly added an element of mystery to communication. The excitement of receiving a page, waiting to find a payphone, and connecting with someone felt almost like an adventure. Real conversations, the heart of 90s dating. Despite the limitations of technology, the 90s still maintained an element of real meaningful communication. Dating back then was slower and conversations were genuine. You couldn't send a text to check in with someone. Instead, you spent hours talking on the phone. Long, deep conversations were the norm, and talking for hours at a time wasn't unusual at all. These conversations were where the real connections happened. Unlike the rushed interactions we often experience today, when you were on the phone with someone, there was no real agenda other than to enjoy each other's company and share your thoughts. It was about getting to know one another, listening, sharing, laughing, and even discussing more profound topics like dreams, fears, and goals. Every phone call felt like an opportunity to bond. Often you would exchange stories, recount your day, and try to understand the other person's life and perspective. These moments of raw, vulnerable conversation were incredibly important in building emotional connections that could eventually lead to something more. The romance of handwritten letters. Another significant part of the 90s dating culture was the art of letter writing. Yes, before the convenience of text messages and emails, people would write out their feelings in handwritten letters. This was an era when a letter or a card carried emotional weight. Every word had to be carefully chosen. If you liked someone, you might sit down and pour your heart out in a letter, sealing it with anticipation, knowing it would take time to arrive at its destination. Writing letters in the 90s was personal, romantic, and sometimes thrilling. The process of waiting for a response and reading the letter felt more intimate. It wasn't immediate, and there was a certain amount of patience involved. When the letter arrived, it was like opening a piece of someone's soul. You didn't just send a text and get an instant response. You created something lasting. The handwriting, the tone of the letter, and even the scent of the paper made it unique. Letters were often exchanged during the early stages of dating, adding a layer of romance and excitement that was incredibly meaningful at the time. The slow pace of 90s. Dating in the 90s was, by today's standards, much slower, but there was something incredibly charming about this. It wasn't about instant gratification or swiping through profiles to find your perfect match in a matter of minutes. No, it was about taking the time to get to know someone, building up the anticipation, and creating a genuine emotional connection over time. There was a sort of deliberate pacing to relationships. The emphasis was on face-to-face meetings, on creating memories together, and on forming lasting connections through real interactions. Whether you were walking through the park, grabbing coffee, or watching a movie, the focus was on spending quality time and getting to know each other at a more organic pace. In today's world, the quick-fix culture of modern dating apps often overshadows this slower, more meaningful approach. But back in the 90s, it was all about the journey rather than the destination. The joy of the simple date. Finally, the 90s were all about simplicity. There were no gimmicks, no elaborate plans for extravagant dates. A simple date, like a walk in the park, a trip to the movies, or even a casual coffee at a local cafe, was all it took to get to know someone. The focus was less on impressing the other person and more on creating genuine, comfortable moments of connection. The simplicity of these experiences allowed for authentic bonding, and that's something that's hard to replicate in today's fast-paced, technology-driven world. In conclusion, dating in the 1990s was all about real conversations, face-to-face meetings, and emotional connections. The era lacked the digital distractions of today, but it made up for it with authenticity, patience, and effort. While we may be living in an age of convenience, there's something undeniably special about the slower, more deliberate approach to dating that defined the 90s. So, take a moment to appreciate the nostalgia of those simpler times, and maybe even reflect on how we can bring some of that old-school romance back into our modern lives. Next stop, the 2000s, the rise of online dating flash. Forward to the early 2000s and bam, the internet was everywhere. Suddenly, online dating became a thing, though it was still a little awkward, but it was the start of something huge. Meeting people. Enter the digital world. The internet had made its way into our homes, and so had chat rooms, AIM, AOL Instant Messenger, and those first awkward dating websites. You'd meet people online, send some text-based messages, and then, wait for it, actually meet them in real life. So much nervous energy, right? If the first meeting went well, you might exchange email addresses or maybe even text. Though back then, text messages were expensive, so you had to be concise. Communication. AIM and emoticons. Remember AIM? That little pop-up window where you'd talk to someone with just a handful of words and a ton of emoticons? And don't forget those grainy video chats where you'd spend 15 minutes trying to get your camera working. Texting was starting to take off, but you had to be smart with your character count. SMS was expensive, so you really had to choose your words wisely. Dating style. Fun and new experiences. Despite the rise of online chats, you still had to meet face-to-face to make it official. Internet cafes became a thing, where people went to play games or watch videos together. Oh, and karaoke bars were where your date could go from awkward to amazing real fast. Now the 2010s, hello smartphones? And then came the 2010s. Smartphones took over and dating moved into the fast lane. Social media platforms became more than just a way to share your vacation pics. They were now the place to find a date. Meeting people. Swipe right. Welcome to the world of dating apps, where everything is a game of swipe right, or swipe left. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, now X, and of course Tinder became the new meeting grounds. You could look at someone's profile, like their photos, and just swipe to see if you match. No need to wait for a callback. This was instant connection, communication, emojis, texts, and video chats. Now communication was all about texting, emojis, and video calls. GIFs and memes became essential parts of the conversation, and if you were lucky, you'd get a voice note or video call. Dating style. Fast, fun, and Instagrammable dating spots got fancier. Trendy restaurants, Instagrammable coffee shops, and adventurous activities like escape rooms and adventure parks. Fast dates became the norm, with people going from chatting to meeting up in a matter of hours. Last stop, the 2020s. Personalized, virtual, and totally different. And here we are in the 2020s. Dating has become even more personalized and virtual than ever. The pandemic made virtual dates more common, and dating apps and platforms have continued to evolve to match modern needs. Meeting people. From apps to live streaming now, dating is all about specific niches. Whether you're into vegan dating, gaming, or political activism, there's an app for you. Live streaming and video dating have become super popular, and short-form videos are now the new way to flirt. Communication, virtual dates, voice notes, and more. Who needs to meet up in person when you can have a virtual date? Watching movies together online, going on virtual museum tours, or playing games in the metaverse are now totally acceptable first dates. Dating style, experience-based and open-minded. Modern dating is fluid. People are prioritizing emotional connections, shared values, and fun experiences like outdoor adventures or escape rooms. And non-defined relationships, like open relationships, are being discussed openly and honestly. So what's next for dating? From the sweet, slow romance of the 90s to today's fast-paced, diverse dating scene, one thing remains true. Everyone just wants to feel connected. Whether it's through handwritten letters or swiping right, technology might change the way we date. But the need for honesty, effort, and respect remains constant. So what's next? Metaverse dates? AI partners? Who knows? But it's going to be interesting to see where we go from here.